Okay, so we're jiving into this place, and it was like this haven for orphans and widows, right? But then it gets taken over by this supposed cult leader in the 70s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so talk about a spooky 180. We're going to uncover the secrets of the Woodman Circle home in Sherman, Texas. And trust me, this place is like a paranormal investigator's dream come true.
I bet.
You're getting like the inside scoop on this Ghost Club Paranormal team's investigation, and their footage is intense.
So you're saying we're talking about a place that goes from like care and compassion to something much darker. That's quite a shift.
Right. And the building itself is like a character in this story. Crumbling concrete, exposed brick, like the walls are holding their breath, waiting to spill their secret.
I can already sense the creepy vibes.
Oh, yeah. And the investigators found some seriously creepy stuff. Like there was a Pennywise figure painted on a wall and a door with hello waits scrawled on it.
Oh, come on.
I'm serious.
That's setting the mood a little too well, don't you think?
Right. So, okay, let's rewind to the beginning. The Woodman Circle home opened its doors in 1928. And for decades, it's like a genuine safe haven for, anyone who needed it. Some residents even described it as like a truly happy and peaceful place.
Hard to imagine that now.
Yeah, especially given what you've said about its current state. That contrast is pretty stark.
It really is. And it makes you wonder, like, what happened there to change the energy so drastically?
Right, because it's not just a dilapidated building we're talking about. It's a place where we had, like, light and darkness kind of colliding, and then they leave behind this imprint of both positive and negative energy.
Yeah, it's like a paranormal pressure cooker.
Exactly.
All those emotions and experiences just crammed into one space. But then things take a really sharp turn in 1977 when this guy, Ben Sherman, enters the picture.
Okay.
The investigators referred to him as a cult leader who turned the building into his own personal tabernacle.
Chills.
Yeah, so imagine our investigators, Jake and Cameron, venturing down into the basement.
And this space was supposedly like Sherman's old recording studio and where he kept the children.
What?
They described the atmosphere as heavy, oppressive. Like something is watching their every move.
That's, I can see why they'd feel that way. Just the thought of being in a place with that kind of history is enough to make anyone uneasy.
Oh, yeah, and even in the footage, you can feel the tension. Like you're right there with them.
So they're not just relying on their intuition, though, right? They're using actual equipment to investigate.
Oh, yeah, they've got their K2 meters, their crumpetods, the whole paranormal investigation toolkit. But before they get any major readings, they stumble upon this chilling sight. An open elevator shaft.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and it turns out this is where a 4-year-old girl tragically fell to her death back when Sherman was running things.
Oh, that's awful. That's so sad.
It is. And to make things even creepier, their K2 meter starts going crazy around the shaft, like it's trying to tell them something.
You said they had all the equipment. A K2 meter is one of those devices that measures electromagnetic fields, right? So what does it mean when it starts going crazy?
Well, it's spiking like erratically. And, some people believe that spirits can manipulate those fields as a way of making their presence known.
Interesting. So that would suggest that maybe there's some kind of energy connected to that tragic event.
Exactly. And as if that wasn't enough, they head towards like the old hospital section of the orphanage and find pentagrams and 666 graffiti plastered on the walls.
Seriously?
It's like stepping into a horror movie.
So we're layering even more on top of this already unsettling history.
Right. And those symbols are often associated with like satanic rituals and the occult, which kind of aligns with what the investigators were saying about Ben Sherman.
Right. That's definitely adding fuel to the fire for anyone interested in the darker side of paranormal investigations.
And let's not forget, the building itself is like falling apart around them. They're literally taking their lives into their own hands to investigate this place.
That's a good point. Sometimes in these paranormal investigations, we get so caught up in the spooky stuff that we forget about the real world dangers.
Right. Like those guys are brave or maybe a little crazy to be going into a place like that.
A little of both, perhaps. But they're dedicated to their work, that's for sure.
They are. So they press on. And in the boys' dormitory, they think they might be communicating with a child spirit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they're using this thing called a REM pod, which basically lights up and makes noises when it detects changes in the environment.
So like motion or temperature changes?
It can be sensitive to all sorts of things, but paranormal investigators think you can also detect the presence of spirits.
especially if you get intelligent
Right.
responses.
And that's what's so interesting about this. They ask questions, and the REM pod seems to respond in a way that makes sense.
So it's not just random beeps and lights, it's actually reacting to their
Yeah, it's
questions.
like they're having a conversation with something unseen.
That's both amazing and kind of creepy at the same time.
Right. It makes you wonder if there are like different types of spirits at play here.
Like some that are just residual energy and others that are more aware and interactive.
Exactly. And this is where the investigation takes a truly shocking turn. Hold on to your hats, folks, because we're about to enter the ritual room.
Okay, I'm ready. Hit me with it. Okay, I'm ready. Hit me with it.
Okay, so picture this. Torches, red candle wax. It's like something straight out of a horror movie.
And this is in the ritual room.
Uh-huh. It's not just like pentagrams in the 6666 graffiti. The investigators say there's this like palpable shift in energy when they enter the room.
Like how?
Like they feel watched, threatened, like they've stumbled into something sacred and forbidden. You know, like they're not supposed to be there.
Right, like they're trespassing on some kind of sacred ground.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then, get this, both of their phones die. Like at the exact same time.
Well, way, seriously.
I'm telling you,
Go.
what are the chances of that happening? Especially in the creepiest room of a supposedly haunted building.
I mean, there could be a logical explanation, right? Like maybe an electromagnetic pulse or something.
Maybe. But it's hard not to think about like something sinister happening, right?
Yeah, especially in this context. Like maybe something doesn't want them to document what's going on in there.
Right. Like something's trying to keep its secrets hidden. And then as they're trying to make sense of all this, they hear footsteps.
Footsteps, like someone walking around.
Yeah, not just someone walking around. These footsteps seem to be following them.
Oh no, that sends chills down my spine.
I know, right? It's like they're being herded out of the room, like something is saying, "You've seen enough time to go."
Ah, that's a very evocative interpretation. I like that.
So they hightail it out of there feeling this rush of energy, like something is right on their heels.
So they don't actually see anything.
Nope. Just that feeling of being watched and followed. They even say they felt marked by the experience, like whatever was in that room latched onto them.
That's a pretty common experience for people who investigate haunted locations, especially those associated with negative energy or entities.
Okay, I'm getting chills just thinking about it. So we've got this ritual room,
Mm-hmm.
potential satanic activity, electronic malfunctions,
Uh-huh.
footsteps, and now this feeling of being marked. It's like all the classic elements of a haunting are converging in this one place.
Absolutely. The Woodman Circle home seems to be a hotbed of paranormal activity. And what's even more interesting is that it's not just one type of activity. We might have residual hauntings from the orphans and staff the presence of Ariel Ben Sherman, and then the possibility of something darker associated with the ritualistic practices.
Right. It's like a layer cake of paranormal phenomena.
Mm-hmm.
But let's go back to Ariel Ben Sherman for a second. We know he took over the orphanage in the 70s and turned it into his tabernacle, but what else do we know about him? Like, what kind of guy was he?
Unfortunately, the investigators don't really go into Sherman's background in much detail. They call him a cult leader, but they don't give specifics about his beliefs or practices.
So there's a lot of room for speculation.
Oh, absolutely. And, for those of us fascinated by the paranormal, that's kind of a good thing, right?
I mean, yeah, it lets our imaginations run wild.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about the kind of energy he might have brought to the Woodman Circle home. Do you think his presence could be contributing to all the unsettling vibes?
It's definitely possible. If you think about the concept of residual energy, the idea that our emotions and experiences can leave an imprint on a location, then it makes sense that Sherman's activities, whatever they were, could be adding to all the paranormal phenomena the investigators are experiencing.
And they kept talking about feeling watched by, like, an authoritative figure. Do you think that could be Sherman? Like his spirit is still there, overseeing everything?
It's an interesting theory. In paranormal investigations, there's often this idea of a dominant spirit, an entity that has a stronger presence or influence in a location. And given Sherman's history as a supposed cult leader, it's not out of the realm of possibility that he could be the dominant spirit at the Woodman Circle home.
So we've got this potentially dark history with Sherman. The energy of the orphans, the possibility of other entities being drawn to the location. It's like a paranormal melting pot. But before we get too lost in all that, let's circle back to the child spirit they thought they were communicating with. Could that be a key piece of this paranormal puzzle?
That's a really good question. It definitely adds another layer of intrigue to this whole thing. It makes you wonder about the nature of this entity, its motivations, and its relationship to the other energies present in the building.
Yeah, and at first they thought this spirit was benevolent and maybe even trying to warn them about something.
Like a guardian spirit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then they started wondering if it was actually manipulating them, leading them towards danger.
That's a fascinating twist.
Mm.
So instead of being guided by a friendly spirit, they might have encountered something more sinister.
It's like a classic horror trope, right?
Yeah.
The creepy kid who's not as innocent as they seem.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's even more unsettling because it plays on our expectations.
Right. We tend to associate children with innocence and purity. So the idea of a child's spirit being malevolent is especially disturbing.
Absolutely. So what do you think? Could they have been tricked by this child spirit?
It's definitely possible, especially if we consider that some entities might be more adept at manipulating human perception than others.
So they might have been led into a dangerous situation as a test or even as a form of entertainment for this spirit.
It's a chilling thought, but it's something to consider. It really highlights how important it is to approach paranormal investigations with a healthy dose of skepticism.
Even when you think you're dealing with something friendly.
Exactly, you can never be too careful. So with all that said, what do you think is the most compelling piece of evidence the investigators encountered?
Honestly, it's hard to pick just one. But for me, it's the ritual room. The whole atmosphere, the sudden death of their phones, it just feels like they stumbled into something truly unsettling.
I agree. That discovery definitely sends chills down my spine. It's like they caught a glimpse of something happening just beyond their perception, something that defies our understanding of reality.
Right. It's like something in that room didn't want them to see what was going on. It drained the energy from their devices to keep its secrets hidden.
It's definitely a possibility. And their description of fleeing the ritual room is particularly chilling.
Yeah.
The footsteps, the rushing energy, the overwhelming dread. It all suggests that they had stumbled into something they weren't meant to see.
Like they crossed a line and the unseen forces were making it very clear they needed to leave.
Exactly. And that feeling of being marked, of something attaching itself to them, that's not uncommon for people who delve into the paranormal. It speaks to the possibility that certain experiences can leave a spiritual residue.
Like a scar on your soul.
Yeah, something like that. It's a reminder that exploring the paranormal comes with risks not just physical, but psychological, and maybe even spiritual.
It's a lot to think about. But I think it's important to acknowledge that this location wasn't always a place of darkness. It started as a haven for those in need, a place of hope and healing. Do you think any of that positive energy still lingers?
That's a fascinating question. And it gets at the heart of what makes paranormal investigations so compelling. If we accept the premise that energy can linger, then it makes sense that both positive and negative energy could coexist in the same space.
So it's not necessarily a battle between good and evil. It's more like a blending of energies, a tapestry woven from the experiences and emotions of everyone who's passed through those doors.
That's beautifully put, and it really speaks to the complexities of the paranormal. It's not a black and white situation. It's usually shades of gray. And it's that ambiguity that keeps us coming back for more, seeking answers in the shadows.
So maybe the Woodman Circle home is both a place of darkness and light, a testament to the full spectrum of human experience.
It's definitely possible, and that makes it all the more fascinating to explore.
Okay, so let's rewind back to that moment in the boys' dormitory. The investigators think they're talking to a child spirit through the REM pod. They're getting these intelligent responses that seem different from all the chaotic energy they've been picking up in other parts of the building. It's like this little beacon of innocence in this otherwise unsettling place.
Right, but that's where things get tricky because they start to question their initial interpretation.
Yeah, like they wanted to believe they'd found this friendly guide, but what if it was actually leading them towards something sinister?
Exactly. It's that classic horror movie trope, the creepy kid who's not as innocent as they appear.
And remember, they end up in that ritual room where both their phones died, and they felt that super intense dread. It's like they were being herded there by something unseen, and that something might have been disguised as this harmless child.
It's definitely a chilling thought to consider. And it makes you wonder about the motivations of these entities.
Yeah.
What if this child spirit was intentionally leading them into a dangerous situation, maybe as a test, or even just for kicks?
Like a paranormal prank.
It's unsettling, but it really underscores how important it is to be skeptical in these investigations, even when you think you're dealing with something friendly.
Okay, so let's try to piece this all together. We've got this former orphanage that may or may not have been a cult center. All this layered history, unsettling imagery, electronic malfunctions, a potential ritual room, and the theory of a manipulative child spirit. It's a lot to digest.
It really is. And out of all of that, what stands out to you as the most compelling evidence?
I think for me is that shift in the investigator's understanding of the child's spirit. At first they think it's benevolent, and then they start to wonder if they're being manipulated. That really highlights the complexity of these investigations.
I agree. It's a good reminder that in this field, things are rarely black and white. What seems obvious at first can reveal hidden depths upon closer examination.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the Woodman Circle home, what's the one thing you really want our listeners to take away from all of this?
I'd say the biggest takeaway is that the paranormal is full of possibilities and mysteries. We don't always get clear-cut answers, and the line between evidence and interpretation can be super blurry. It requires an open mind, but also a critical eye and a willingness to question everything, even your own perceptions.
And maybe most importantly, a healthy